Alara stood at the edge of the village square, the wind tangling her silver hair around her face. The sun dipped low over the kingdom of Arendor, casting long shadows across cobblestones that had seen centuries of pride and cruelty. For as long as she could remember, Alara had been different. Born with the rare silver mark on her wrist, she had been whispered about in the halls of the nobles as an omen, a curiosity, and sometimes an annoyance. Her gentle heart, her quiet voice, and her strange magic made her an easy target for mockery. That evening, a message had arrived from the royal palace. A golden invitation, edged in black ink, embossed with the crest of King Darion himself. The word seemed polite, almost courteous, but Alara's eyes caught the faint shadow of a cruel jest in the phrasing. It was an invitation to the grand masquerade, a night when the nobles would gather, adorned in jewels and silk, to dance and flaunt their power. And she, the rejected Omega, had been invited as a joke. Her chest tightened. She knew the truth behind the smile of her cousin, Lissa, who had insisted she accept the invitation. "It will be fun," Lissa had said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "Everyone will laugh, and you will be forgotten again." Alara clenched the paper in her hand. Her first instinct was to tear it into pieces and throw it into the river. She had faced mockery before, in the market, at the village gatherings, and even in the small court of minor nobles who came to her town for trade. But something inside her stirred that evening, a flicker of defiance, quiet but insistent. She would not be the lamb laughed at. If they wished to mock her, she would arrive, and they would see her as she truly was, unbroken, unexpected, and luminous. The night of the masquerade, Alara stepped into her chamber, where she had spent hours preparing. Her gown was unlike anything the nobles would have expected, midnight silk that shimmered faintly, catching the light of the lanterns and moon, woven with threads that seemed to ripple like water. She wore a mask of silver filigree, delicate yet imposing, concealing her identity but emphasizing the sharp intelligence in her eyes. Her hair cascaded down her back, glinting like frost under the starlight. When she stepped outside, the carriage waiting for her gleamed black and gold. It rolled through the city streets, past marble statues and gilded balconies, past crowds that had not expected to see her at all. Whispers followed her as she passed. "Is that Alara? Here?" She ignored them. The stares of the town, the ridicule of the market, none of it mattered now. She had chosen her own power tonight. The palace gates opened to reveal a world of splendor and danger. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, their light scattering across the polished marble floors. Musicians played strings that sounded like wind over ice, and dancers twirled in gowns that shone like gemstones. Nobles adorned in masks and heavy jewelry moved through the hall, laughing, speaking in tones of command, and testing one another with subtle glances. Alara's entrance caused a ripple. Conversations paused. Laughter faltered. Eyes followed her. And for the first time in her life, she felt the weight of attention without immediate scorn. But it was not just her appearance that caused the pause. Shadows seemed to bend around her as she walked, reacting to her presence. It was subtle at first, an almost imperceptible shimmer at the edges of her vision, but she felt it, the hum of power that had always been a part of her. Some of the older nobles, those who had studied the old texts, recognized the signs. The silver-marked Omega was not merely a curiosity. She carried an energy that was wild, untamed, and potentially dangerous. Among the gathering, Kaelin watched. The prince had been the subject of as many whispers as Alara, though for very different reasons. He was known for his command over the Sunstone, an ancient artifact that radiated power through his very being. He carried himself with the weight of the kingdom on his shoulders. And yet, there was a loneliness in his dark eyes that few had seen. As Alara entered, he felt an inexplicable pull, a sense that she was unlike anyone he had ever encountered. She was not afraid of him, nor did she seek his approval, and yet she drew him in with something both haunting and compelling. The nobles who had planned the jest, several young men and women of high rank, stood together near the main dais. Their smiles froze as they watched her move through the hall, her posture straight, her gaze calm. The joke they had prepared, the humiliation they had anticipated, crumbled before her silent confidence. She did not stumble, she did not falter. She walked as though the palace itself belonged to her. A silver flame in a sea of gold and jeweled masks. Alara paused near the center of the hall, and the music shifted, drawn to her presence, as though it recognized her power. The courtiers whispered to one another, speculation in their tones. What magic does she carry? She is more than an Omega, more than anyone expected. Even the jesters, trained to provoke laughter, could not bring themselves to speak. Kalen stepped forward, making his way through the crowd until he was at her side. "You have a presence that cannot be ignored," he said quietly, his voice carrying both curiosity and caution. "Few can enter this place and make it stop, yet here you are." "Why?" "Fori." Alara regarded him steadily, her lips curving in a faint, knowing smile. "I did not come to please anyone," she said. "I came to see what they truly fear." Kalen studied her, sensing a depth of understanding and a spark of defiance that mirrored his own struggles. They stood together, silent amidst the swirling crowd, a spark igniting between them that neither fully understood. Then, without warning, a chill swept through the hall. The candles flickered, the shadows stretched and writhed. The nobles murmured nervously. The air itself seemed to vibrate, resonating with a force that had lain dormant for centuries. Kalen's hand tightened over the sunstone at his chest. "Something has awakened," he whispered, almost to himself. Alara felt it too. The magic within her pulsed in response, reacting to the unseen presence that had been stirred by her arrival. She understood, in a way that few could, that this night would not end with laughter or ridicule. This night had been the spark that would ignite change not just for her, but for the kingdom itself. The nobles who had meant to mock her watched her with fear and awe now. The tables of power had shifted, if only slightly, and Alara knew that her journey was only beginning. In the quiet of the grand hall, beneath the glittering chandeliers and the masked faces, the rejected Omega had become something new, a figure of mystery, strength, and silent challenge. As the music swelled once more, Alara moved toward the center of the hall, and Kalen followed, drawn to her like a moth to flame. No one spoke of the curse that lurked in the palace's history, but both of them felt it stir, sensing that her presence was far more than coincidence. The air was thick with anticipation, shadows leaning closer as if eager to see the unfolding drama. Alara's gaze swept the crowd, meeting eyes that had once sneered at her with now a mixture of fear and respect. She felt the power within her, rising, and realized that she could no longer remain hidden. She was not a pawn to be mocked. She was something stronger, something alive. And tonight, she would show them all. And in the corner of the hall, a masked figure observed her silently. Their eyes glowed faintly beneath the mask, and their lips moved in words only the shadows could hear. They feared her for nothing. Soon, they will fear her for everything. Alara shivered. Not from fear, but from the thrill of what was to come. She knew her life had changed with a single step into the palace, and nothing would ever be the same. The night had begun, and with it, a storm of magic, power, and destiny had been awakened. The night deepened over Arendor, and the masquerade continued, but the air was heavier now. Alara moved gracefully through the crowd, her eyes calm yet alert. The nobles who had intended to mock her now whispered nervously behind their masks. They sensed something in her that went beyond her beauty or poise, something powerful, something unpredictable. Shadows seemed to cling to her, following her every step. Kalen stayed close, though he made no attempt to draw attention. His dark eyes followed her as if trying to unravel a riddle. There was something magnetic about Alara that he could not resist. He had faced many dangers, rebellions, rival kingdoms, even the wild magic of the Sunstone. But he had never felt the quiet intensity she radiated. "She is not what we expected," a young noble whispered to another. "There is a fire in her we cannot name." Alara heard the comment but paid it no mind. She had grown used to their fear, their misunderstanding, and their judgment. Tonight, she was not here to prove anything to them. She was here to understand herself and perhaps to understand the role she had been chosen to play. Kaelin finally approached her fully, stepping beside her with measured caution. "You command attention without trying," he said softly, his voice low enough for only her to hear. "Few can do that in this hall. Few can make the walls themselves pause." Alara tilted her head slightly, studying him under the mask. "And you are one of the few who does not fear me," she said, her voice calm, yet carrying the weight of challenge. "Why?" Kaelin hesitated. He had always believed that fear was the foundation of control, that the nobles and citizens of Arendor needed to respect power through caution. But Alara did not fit into the rules he knew. She did not demand submission, nor did she flaunt her magic. She simply existed with it, like a force of nature. "I do not know," he admitted, surprising himself. "Perhaps I see in you what others cannot. Perhaps I sense that you are more than you appear." Alara considered his words, and for a moment, the music and laughter of the hall faded into silence around them. There was a connection forming between them, subtle and unspoken, a thread of understanding that neither of them could ignore. But the night was not meant for quiet reflection. As the orchestra played a soft, haunting melody, a sudden shiver ran through the hall. The candles flickered and the chandeliers swayed. Though no breeze entered the room, the nobles froze, their whispers faltering. Something ancient, something dangerous, had awakened. Alara felt it immediately. The magic within her stirred, drawn to the presence of the sunstone that Kaelin carried. The pulse of its power resonated with hers, a rhythm both thrilling and terrifying. She could feel the shadows gathering, stretching and moving unnaturally along the walls, as if alive. "Kaelin," she said quietly, "something is coming." He nodded, his jaw tight. "I feel it too. This curse, it has been sleeping for centuries, but you have awakened it." Alara's heart raced, not with fear, but with the weight of responsibility. She had always felt different, always known she was not ordinary. Yet now, standing in the center of the palace, she realized that her destiny was intertwined with forces far larger than herself. The curse that haunted Arendor's royal bloodline could either be broken by her, or it could destroy everything. The nobles, oblivious to the danger, began to panic as the shadows crept closer. Candles went out one by one, leaving the room in a dim, flickering light. Whispers of fear rose to shouts, and guests scrambled toward the exits, unsure of what they faced. But Alara did not move. She felt the energy around her, the potential in her own magic, and she knew she could not let fear control her. Kaelin reached for her hand, a steadying presence in the chaos. "We must control it together," he said. "Your power and mine, they are linked in ways I cannot yet explain. But alone, neither of us can face what comes." Alara looked at him, the intensity of the moment binding them in a silent agreement. She nodded, her silver mark glowing faintly beneath the sleeve of her gown. Together, they stepped toward the center of the hall, where the pulse of magic was strongest. The shadows shifted, forming shapes that seemed almost human, twisted by dark intent. The nobles who had mocked Alara now cowered, realizing the danger they had invited into the palace. The masquerade, once a display of wealth and frivolity, had become a battlefield of unseen forces. Alara raised her hands slightly, feeling the magic respond to her will. It was not yet perfect, she was still learning, but she could direct it, shape it, hold it back from consuming everything. The shadows recoiled, as if recognizing her command. Kaelin focused the power of the sunstone, sending a steady, bright pulse that reinforced her control. Together, they formed a circle of light and energy that pushed the darkness back. The nobles watched, mouths open, as the Omega they had mocked became a figure of awe and authority. Alara's presence was no longer timid or uncertain. She was radiant with control, with strength, and with a quiet confidence that none of them had expected. Yet even as the immediate danger receded, a new tension emerged. Kaelin and Alara could feel the strain of their magic, the link between them that had been forged in the heat of crisis. It was more than necessity, it was something personal, something electric that neither fully understood. "You are stronger than I imagined," Kalen said, his eyes searching hers. "And more beautiful in a way I cannot name." Alara felt a warmth rise in her chest, a flutter of emotion she had rarely allowed herself to feel. She did not answer immediately, letting the silence between them speak. It was not just admiration, there was an understanding, a recognition of shared strength and shared responsibility. As the music resumed, slower now, Alara realized that the masquerade had changed entirely. It was no longer a stage for ridicule or status. It had become a test of power, of courage, and of the bonds that could form between those who were willing to stand together in the face of darkness. The masked figure who had warned her earlier reappeared, moving silently among the crowd. Alara caught only a glimpse of their glowing eyes before they vanished again, leaving a sense of urgency and foreboding in the room. The shadows had been repelled, but the warning was clear. This was only the beginning. Kalen leaned closer, his voice almost a whisper. "They feared you for nothing, Alara. Soon, they will fear you for everything." Alara nodded, feeling the truth of his words resonate deep within her. The night had revealed much, not only the hidden power within her, but also the bonds that could shape her destiny. She had survived mockery and threat, and in doing so, she had discovered a strength she had never known she possessed. Yet even in her triumph, doubt lingered. Could she control the magic that stirred within her? Could she navigate the complicated ties to Kalen, the prince whose presence both reassured and unnerved her? And most importantly, could she face the curse that now sought her out, a force as old as the kingdom itself? As the guests fled the hall, leaving only servants and the bravest courtiers behind, Alara and Kalen remained at the center, the glow of their combined power casting long shadows on the walls. There was a moment of silence, heavy and charged, as both of them understood that the masquerade had ended but the real challenge had only begun. Alara felt a quiet thrill in her chest. For the first time, she was not hiding, not afraid, not powerless. She was visible, significant, and alive in a way that transcended the expectations of others. And though the path ahead was uncertain, though the shadows of the past and future loomed, she knew she would not walk it alone. Together, they would face what was coming. Together, they would confront the curse. And together, they would discover how far their connection could reach. Through fire, shadow, and light. Cliffhanger. A sudden crack echoed through the palace walls, deep and resonant, as though the building itself groaned in warning. Shadows gathered once more in unnatural shapes, darker and more aggressive than before. Alara and Kalen exchanged a look of determination and dread. This was no ordinary threat. Something ancient, powerful, and malevolent had been awakened, and it hungered for more than fear. It hungered for her. The sun had not yet risen over Arendor, but the palace was alive with tension. Alara had spent the night at the center of the grand hall, her silver mark glowing faintly as she studied the lingering shadows. Though she and Kalen had pushed back the immediate danger of the masquerade, the curse that haunted the royal bloodline was far from vanquished. Its pulse lingered in the air, a dark rhythm that seemed to echo through the very walls of the palace. Kalen approached her quietly, stepping over the fallen candelabras and shattered mirrors that bore witness to the previous night's chaos. "Are you certain you can control it?" he asked, his voice low, tinged with worry. "Even a moment's lapse." "I am learning," Alara interrupted, her tone firm, yet calm. "I have never faced something like this before, but neither have you. We are stronger together. That is enough." Kalen studied her for a long moment, noting the quiet confidence in her eyes. He had faced armies, rebellions, and storms of magic fueled by rage and ambition, but never had he met someone who wielded power with such calm determination. Alara was not reckless, nor arrogant. She understood the weight of her abilities, the burden of being chosen by forces she did not fully comprehend. Together, they moved to the council chamber, where the most powerful nobles had gathered in secret. Their purpose was simple: to confront Alara, to test her, and to ensure she posed no threat to the hierarchy of the kingdom. Yet, even as the chamber doors closed behind them, Alara could sense their fear. She was no longer merely an Omega, rejected and ridiculed. She was a force to be reckoned with, and the court could not deny it. "Step forward," one of the council members demanded, his voice sharp and commanding. "Show us that you are not the harbinger of doom our ancestors feared." Alara stepped into the center of the chamber, her gown flowing around her like liquid night. Her silver mark pulsed softly, a subtle reminder of the energy she carried. "I do not seek to be your harbinger," she said. "I seek only to protect this kingdom from the darkness that has long haunted it." The council murmured among themselves, disbelief and apprehension mingling in their whispers. Many of them had thought her weak, fragile, incapable of wielding influence or power. Now, faced with her unwavering gaze and the quiet strength radiating from her, they found themselves uncertain, afraid even. Kalen stepped beside her, offering silent support. His presence was steady, grounding her as they prepared to face both the council and the ancient curse that stirred in the shadows. "She is not alone," he said simply, his voice carrying across the room. "Together, we can confront what has lingered for centuries." The council attempted to challenge them, calling forth minor enchantments and illusions meant to test Alara's skill and resolve. But she moved with a precision and clarity that left them stunned. Shadows twisted at her command, bending to her will, yet never harming those she wished to protect. Kalen amplified her power with the Sunstone, sending pulses of light through the chamber that stabilized her magic and reinforced the protective circle they had formed. As the council witnessed her abilities, their fear deepened, but so did a grudging respect. Alara, once dismissed as weak, had become a symbol of hope and a reminder that power could reside where least expected. Yet the trials of magic were not the only trials she faced. As the days passed, her connection with Kalen deepened, shifting from cautious alliance to something more intimate, more electric. There was tension in every glance, every brush of their hands as they manipulated the magic around them. Neither spoke of it directly, but both felt the pull, the unspoken attraction that grew stronger with each shared struggle. One evening, as they trained in the courtyard under a pale moon, Alara paused to catch her breath. Her hands were trembling slightly from the exertion of bending shadows and energy to her will. Kalen approached, his expression unreadable, yet his eyes lingered on her with an intensity she could not ignore. "You are extraordinary," he said quietly, his voice low, almost a whisper. "There is something beyond your magic. Something that draws me as much as it frightens me." Alara met his gaze, her own pulse quickening. "Do you fear me?" she asked softly, though the question carried more than simple curiosity. Kalen hesitated. "I do not know," he admitted. "I fear the power. Yes. But I also fear what I might feel if I let myself see you fully. You are unlike anyone I have ever known." For a long moment, they stood in silence, the night air thick with unspoken emotion. The shadows around them flickered and twisted, as though sensing the intensity of their connection. Alara realized that their bond was more than mutual trust or shared purpose. It was a tether of energy, one that made their powers stronger when they were together, but potentially more dangerous if they were divided. The palace, however, offered little respite. News arrived that the curse had stirred in other parts of the kingdom, affecting villages and forests far from the capital. Creatures twisted by dark magic roamed the outskirts, and those who had once dismissed Alara now pleaded for her guidance. Each day brought new challenges, forcing her to confront both the limits of her power and the weight of responsibility that came with it. Through it all, Kalen remained by her side, a steady presence and a willing partner in the battles both magical and political. They faced attacks, navigated treacherous alliances, and discovered secrets long hidden within the palace walls. Alara's confidence grew with each victory, yet she knew that the curse was far from defeated. One night, a servant approached her with a message delivered by a hooded figure. The note was simple, written in a delicate hand. "The shadows are not finished. They hunger for more than fear. They hunger for you." Alara felt a shiver run down her spine. though her resolve did not waver. She showed the note to Kalen, who read it carefully, his expression darkening. "This confirms what I suspected," he said. "The curse is drawn to your presence, and it grows stronger each time we encounter it. We must prepare." Alara nodded, feeling the weight of their shared destiny settle on her shoulders. She had come to the palace as a target for mockery, but now she stood at the center of something far greater than herself. Her power, once a secret to be hidden, had become a beacon of hope and a focal point for the ancient forces that sought to test the kingdom. As the days passed, Alara and Kalen trained tirelessly. Their powers intertwined. The tension between them, both magical and personal, grew with each encounter. Every glance, every touch, carried a spark of something dangerous yet exhilarating. They were bound not only by necessity but by an unspoken connection that neither could deny. Then, one evening, as the sun set behind the distant hills, a massive wave of darkness surged toward the palace. The shadows formed into monstrous shapes, taller than any man, eyes glowing with malice. The nobles who had once mocked Alara screamed in terror, their illusions and defenses crumbling before the raw force of the curse. Alara and Kalen moved together as one, their magic forming a protective barrier around the palace and its inhabitants. The battle was fierce, testing every ounce of their strength, skill, and trust. Alara's silver mark blazed brighter than ever, a beacon of determination and hope, while Kalen channeled the sunstone to amplify their defenses. Through the struggle, they discovered that their bond could do more than defend it, could repel, shape, and even calm the darkness. The connection between them was not merely emotional. It was magical, a force capable of shaping the very fabric of the curse itself. Finally, as dawn broke over the kingdom, the shadows retreated, leaving the palace battered but standing. Alara and Kalen stood side by side, breathing heavily, their eyes meeting in a moment of unspoken understanding. The battle had been won, but the curse had not been destroyed. Its hunger remained, and its attention on Alara had only grown stronger. They had faced the first real trial together, and their trust and bond had solidified in the fire of combat. Yet both knew that even greater dangers lay ahead, forces that would test not only their powers but their hearts and their courage. Cliffhanger. As Alara stepped to the balcony, watching the first light of dawn spill across Arendor, a whisper echoed through the wind, a voice ancient and hollow, calling her name. The curse was not finished. It was watching, and it knew that the Omega it sought was more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The palace of Arendor was silent under the first light of dawn, yet an uneasy tension lingered in the air. Alara stood at the balcony, her silver mark faintly glowing, the energy within her pulsing like a heartbeat. The battles of the previous nights had tested her in ways she had never imagined, and now the curse, older than the kingdom itself, was calling her again. Kalen joined her quietly, placing a hand on the railing beside hers. "It knows you are ready," he said softly, his voice steady but filled with concern. "And it knows we are stronger together." Alara nodded, taking a deep breath. "We have come far, but the final trial is upon us. This curse, it wants more than fear. It wants to see if we can rise above it." They moved through the palace halls, their steps silent yet purposeful. The corridors were dark, lit only by the faint glow of their combined magic. Shadows lingered at the edges, watching, waiting, testing them. Alara could feel the energy of the curse growing stronger, a weight pressing down on her very soul. Yet she did not falter. She had learned control, focus, and trust, and she would not let fear dictate her actions. Reaching the central chamber, they found the source of the curse. A swirling vortex of darkness, shifting and alive, its form ever-changing and impossible to fully perceive. The air was thick with tension, charged with energy that seemed to reach into the past, present, and future simultaneously. Alara stepped forward, her hands rising instinctively. The silver mark on her wrist burned brightly, resonating with the dark energy before her. Kalen stood beside her, the sunstone glowing in response to her power. Together, they formed a circle of light and energy that pushed back the darkness, holding it at bay. "You have come far, Omega," a voice echoed through the chamber, hollow and ancient. "Do you truly believe you can stand against me?" Alara did not answer immediately. She focused, drawing power from within, from the lessons she had learned, from the courage that had carried her this far. "I do not stand alone," she said firmly, "and this kingdom does not face its fears alone either. Your time ends tonight." The darkness recoiled, testing, probing, striking with tendrils of shadow that twisted like living things. Kaelin responded instantly, channeling the sunstone to reinforce their defenses. Alara met the attacks with precision, guiding the shadows back with controlled pulses of energy. They were a dance of light and dark, a struggle of wills and strength, yet every motion was precise, every movement purposeful. As the battle raged, Alara felt something shift inside her. The silver mark glowed with an intensity she had never experienced before. And the energy of the curse responded not with aggression, but with recognition. It was as if the darkness understood that she was no longer afraid, no longer uncertain. She had grown into her power, embraced it, and accepted the responsibility it carried. Kaelin's hand brushed hers briefly as they moved, and in that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. Their bond had grown beyond necessity or strategy. It was trust, respect, and something deeper, something neither of them had fully named. Together, they were stronger than the curse had anticipated. With a deep breath, Alara focused all her energy, guiding it through the sunstone and into the vortex. The shadows shrieked and twisted, resisting, but her control was absolute. Kaelin mirrored her movements, reinforcing the flow of power, their energies intertwining like rivers converging into a single, unstoppable force. For a moment, it seemed as though the darkness would overwhelm them. The chamber shook, the walls cracking, and the very air thickened with tension. But Alara held steady, drawing on every lesson, every challenge, every triumph that had brought her to this point. She was no longer the Omega who had been mocked and dismissed. She was a force of nature, a beacon of light, and the curse could no longer resist her. Slowly, the darkness began to falter. Tendrils of shadow dissipated into mist. Whispers faded into silence, and the oppressive weight lifted from the air. The vortex shrank, spiraling inward until it vanished entirely, leaving the chamber bathed in a soft, golden light. Alara and Kaelin stood at the center, their hands clasped, hearts pounding, bodies trembling from exertion, yet victorious. The council and remaining nobles entered the chamber cautiously, eyes wide with awe and fear. They had expected a weak Omega, someone to ridicule or underestimate. Instead, they found a young woman who had mastered power, faced darkness, and emerged stronger than any of them could have imagined. Alara lowered her hands, the silver mark dimming to a soft glow. She looked around the chamber, her gaze steady, and spoke with quiet authority. "The kingdom has survived because we faced our fears, because we trusted in strength beyond appearances. Let this be remembered. Courage and truth are more powerful than mockery and fear." A murmur of respect rippled through the crowd. The nobles who had once laughed at her now bowed, their faces filled with humility. Alara had transformed not only herself, but the perceptions of those around her. Kaelin stepped closer, his hand brushing hers once more. "You were always more than they believed," he said softly. "I am grateful that I saw it before they did." Alara smiled faintly, feeling warmth in her chest. "And I am grateful you stood with me," she replied. "Together, we have done what no one else could." For a long moment, they simply stood there. The golden light of the chamber, reflecting off their intertwined energies. There was no need for words. The connection between them was undeniable. They had faced fear, power, and destiny together. And through it all, they had found trust, respect, and something tender, blossoming amidst the trials. But even in victory, Alara knew the world remained uncertain. The kingdom was safe, for now, yet shadows lingered at the edges of every story, waiting for opportunity. She had faced the curse, but the lessons of strength, resilience, and courage would remain her companions forever. Kaelin looked into her eyes, seeing the depth of experience, the fire of determination, and the quiet vulnerability she had carried alone for so long. "The world may never truly understand you," he said, "but I will stand by you. Always." Alara felt a shiver of emotion run through her. She had once been invisible, dismissed, mocked, and rejected. Now, she was seen not only for her power, but for her heart, her courage, and the essence of who she truly was. She had claimed her place in the kingdom, not through fear, but through strength, wisdom, and the quiet refusal to be defeated. The sun rose fully over Arendor, casting light across the palace and its gardens. Alara and Kaelin stood together on the balcony once more, looking out over the kingdom they had protected. The air was fresh, the birds sang, and the world seemed to hold its breath, as though acknowledging their triumph. "I think we have changed more than the kingdom," Alara said softly, her eyes on the horizon. "We have changed ourselves," Kaelin nodded, his gaze meeting hers with intensity. "And together, we will face whatever comes next. Shadows, curses, or challenges. We will face them as one." For the first time in her life, Alara felt complete. Not because the kingdom had recognized her, nor because the curse was gone, but because she had embraced herself fully, her power, her courage, and her heart. She had turned mockery into respect, weakness into strength, and fear into triumph. The palace around them was quiet. The danger passed, but the memory of what had been faced together lingered. Alara and Kaelin had not only defeated the darkness, they had discovered something more profound, a bond of trust, understanding, and the beginnings of love, tempered in the fire of trial and courage. As they watched the sun rise higher over Arendor, Alara felt a quiet certainty settle within her. The kingdom was safe, the curse defeated, and the path ahead, though uncertain, was theirs to walk together. No longer mocked, no longer dismissed, she was the Omega, who had risen, a symbol of hope, strength, and transformation. Yet, as they stood hand in hand, a faint ripple in the air reminded Alara that vigilance would always be necessary. Darkness could return, and the world would always challenge those who dared to rise above it. But she was ready. And with Kaelin by her side, she knew they could face anything. The light of the morning bathed the palace in gold, shadows retreating into the corners, leaving clarity, hope, and the promise of a new beginning. Alara lifted her hand, letting the silver mark shine proudly, a testament to the journey she had endured and the power she now fully embraced. Cliffhanger, closing hook. Far beyond the palace, in a distant, forgotten tower, a faint shadow stirred. Though the curse had been vanquished, whispers of its legacy remained. The Omega, who had been mocked and rejected, would not face her destiny alone, but the world still held mysteries that would call her name again. The story was not over, and the echoes of shadows hinted at trials yet to come.